Thank you so much. And I am a result of TAPS. I didn't want to be emotional, but I had a professor, Dr. Joan Baldwin, that really encouraged me and softened me. Because I come from a family, my mom and grandma both attended college, but I only had one cousin that graduated from college when I came to college. And I really appreciate, I also was involved in some undergraduate research that, again, I would not have sought out on my own. I appreciate that. And we do have experiments in our home. We probably are the only one that, when the brother says, this lettuce tastes like Scott's socks, because it was grown in his room, was correct. I don't think most people can say that. And I'm just going to introduce a little bit. So I came here and went into nursing, partially because of a sentence that was in my patriarchal blessing. And then when I graduated, when I was working the night shift at a primary and came home and went through the universe, and there was a page article for advertising the Master's in Public Administration program. And there was a quote that said, all it takes for the power of evil to do win is for good men to do nothing. And that kind of struck a chord with me. And my nursing professor said, Kim, do your master's in nursing, and then you can do your PhD in anything. And so I finished that up, and just before my first was born, I had everything done except for my thesis write-up. And all I wanted to do was hold that baby and just look at him. And my husband said, Kim, you have to do your write-up. You've got 2 hours a day that you have to devote to that. And so I was able to finish that. And then I quit work when my oldest was born, and Primary Children's wanted to staff up for the Olympics. So I got a letter in the mail saying, hey, come work 3 shifts a month. And that's what I've done ever since. And the last 10 years I've been at the psych unit. And then one time in rounds I heard the doctor saying that it was a 6-month waiting list for children to get in to see a psychiatrist or a practitioner, and that just seemed unforgivable. And so I knew I could do something about it, and has it worked sometimes? Of course, 2 weeks later the open house at the U was there. A month later, or 2 months later, the application was due, and here I am. I've got 3 semesters left, so I'm kind of like some of you juniors. I'll be done in a year. I'm going to start out by telling a story. This is a picture of Lorna Malin Cole, and you look at what a sweet picture this is. Some of you have been interested in science since a little girl, and she obviously was interested in science. Look at, she's being a nurse to her brother. I have never met her, but I was reading her obituary several years ago and realized instantly that we were related. And the reason why is because her dad is an alphabet Malin. The Malins are a family up in Ogden, and they named their oldest son Alexis Bartholomew, and the second one was Claudius Daniel. They had an XY Zella, and they started over again. And my great-grandfather is Nahum Oscar, N.O., and her father was G.H., Gideon Hiley. So I was excited to read her obituary. And she is a woman of science. She graduated from the University of Utah in chemistry in 1938 and had some other plans to go on, but they were thwarted because of the Great Depression. But she raised her 2 children, her 2 boys, and used her her science education in her home. And this is from her obituary. She was the only mother on the block to provide ether and emphasized bullfrogs to teach her sons amphibian anatomy. When her young sons brought home dead gophers, she cheerfully surrendered her pressure cooker to boil off the meat and assemble skeletons. When living in Los Angeles, she was a volunteer at the Metabolic Research Unit at UCLA. Her role was to set up from scratch a serum calcium assay for use in the myeloma research. Among her choicest memories were the times that medical staff would slip over from the UCLA hospital with a sample of blood and ask her to give them the real serum calcium level. So you can tell that she gained a lot of personal satisfaction from her medical background. And just out of curiosity, I Googled her son, and I was thrilled. This is from the Salt Lake Tribune in December of 2012. This is her son, Dr. Hal Cole. And he's at the 4th Street Clinic administering hepatitis shots. The 4th Street Clinic is for the homeless, caters to homeless, and he was a volunteer there. And I just thought, what an incredible legacy to have someone that became a doctor, his brother became a dentist, and that he also, though, cares about his fellow man. Okay. In 2001, President Hinckley, in the General Conference, said, education is the key to opportunity. And you may know that the church started the Perpetual Education Fund to rescue saints out of the cycle of poverty. And that the website says that more than 90,000 lives have been touched by the program. More recently is the Pathways program, and it's an online college, and my younger sister even used that. And there's missionaries that help these students go back to school, and apparently more than 40,000 have used it. Just last year, the church announced that any return missionary could have a year free of Pathway Connect. And the reason why is, I think, partially because of this next quote. And this is from a report from the American Public Health Association. Education is the single most important modifiable social determinant of health. So another quote from that same report says, income and education are the two big ones that correlate most strongly with life expectancy and most health status measures. So on an aggregate level, social determinants such as education are more impactful than genetics on a person's longevity. And congratulations to you. By graduating, you will have helped your life extend 3 years, or be 3 years longer than those who do not graduate from high school. Okay. There's a quote from President Russell M. Nelson, but back when he was an apostle. And it said, because of our sacred regard for each human intellect, we consider the obtaining of education to be a religious responsibility. And we as women have an incredible church history, LDS history. There's on your app, you can listen to Daughters of My Kingdom and listen about women in history. And in 1873, Eliza R. Snow reported that Brigham Young wanted, quote, a good many sisters to get a classical education and then get a degree for medicine. So a group went back to the eastern states and went to medical school and came back and taught midwifery and nursing classes. In 1902, the General Relief Society presidency sponsored a program to train nurses, and in 1920, the Relief Society established a training program for nurses' aides. And it was neat to hear that they didn't charge tuition, but they just required each nurse aide to go back to her community and give 30 days of service, of nursing service. And I think it is incredible to be a woman nowadays. This is a quote from President Hinckley, and he said, this is when he was talking to the National Press Club in March of 2000. People wonder what we do for our women. I'll tell you what we do. We get out of their way and look with wonder at what they're accomplishing. And his wife one time said to him, you have always given me wings to fly, and I have loved you for it. And happily, that's the same way that I feel about with my husband. And think about being a woman of science. Did you know that for the past several decades, from the information I received, it says more women have graduated with their bachelor's than men. More women are accepted to Harvard now than men. 5 of the universities here in Utah are led by women. And a few months ago, the first all-female spacewalk happened. And then I just barely read, and this may or may not be related, but the first cookies were baked in space just a couple of weeks ago. It took 4 hours, and I guess they could smell them, but they're not letting them taste them until they make sure they're safe. One reason I love being a woman of science is flexibility. Many of us will never be the primary provider for our families. So we have the flexibility to do work, to volunteer, to teach, to care for children, start a business, other things. And none of them are easy, but we have the flexibility to do that. And partially with our science education, it's valued in the world, and so we can get compensated for it. And I know of women that work for home to support their husband through school, and then, just at different times in your life. Day to day, it's flexible. For my master's degree, I did my internship up at the Health Policy Commission. I've always been interested in politics and policy. And over the years, I didn't really use my master's degree. I worked as a nurse, but not using my master's. But it has helped. I've gone up to the legislature to testify for policy and been politically involved that way. And so it was helpful and brought me a lot of joy. It's also important to know that over the course of our lifetime, we can be flexible. Like here, I'm back at school after raising my children, and I still anticipate a couple decades working as a nurse practitioner and enjoying that. You do have to know that there is a learning curve. When I first became a mother, I had been in school for 10 years, and when you're in school, you feel like you're at the top of the world. You're going to go change things. You've got this, just the future's open, and you're phenomenal. And then at home with my baby, who dictated my schedule, and I had to change his diapers and do laundry, and I realized now I was doing something that society values least. I mean, we don't pay very much money for those that do that. But I remember I said, Kim, just be patient, and as you get used to it, it'll get easier, and I have loved it. This is the picture of my family. My oldest son's on a mission, so this was taken over a year ago, but then of course it was a transition for me going back to school and getting used to Canvas and online things, and I struggled a little bit with that. It seems that many women underestimate their importance in the home and overestimate their importance in the workplace. I have a story of the worst babysitting experience I ever had. I used to babysit these two very hyper little boys, and we tried to pick up blocks, and they would throw them at my head instead of in the bucket. And the worst night, I was trying to get them to bed, and they just ran off into the bathroom, locked the door, turned the water on full stream. I could hear it just pouring in the sink. Soon I could hear it splashing on the floor, and they would not open the door to my knocks. And then it came out and got in the carpet, and I was stuck until his parents came home. Well, you will be thrilled to know that this very naughty little boy went on to get his PhD and his Dr. Ridge in the biology department. I have not talked to him, and I don't know if he even remembers that. But so when your little boys are naughty like that, just think they may have a science brain and may go on to get their PhD. So this next line, we have a neurodevelopment. I took a neurodevelopment class. I just want to point out that your brain develops new cells in the first few months of life, the first few weeks, and then also makes a lot of connections. And then the rest of your life, you're kind of doing myelination and pruning. It's just making those connections between parts of your brain better. And like, for example, if you play violin or things, those areas of your brain become better attached, I guess, or connected. But the children that I work with, many of them had experienced drugs in utero. They were neglected or abused as children. And this last summer we did an intensive outpatient group with them where we met for 2 hours twice a week. And these children are from ages 3 to 10 and in most of them adoptive homes. And here we are, all of us are master's prepared or getting their master's degrees. And what we did looks like what any preschool does. We would do hokey pokey. We'd call it the weather on their back, but we'd rub their back. We'd have them touch, like cross touch. We'd make instruments and have them try to beat rhythms. And the reason why is you look at that time when the brain is developing, and normally the mother rocks the baby or pats the baby or all that motion that these children did not receive. And I feel that often women underestimate their importance in the home with their children and overestimate their importance at work. And so when you have babies, please rock them and sing to them and do all those things that are necessary for their brain development. A lot of our theories in therapy go back to the attachment between the mother and the baby and the felt safe, the safety that they feel. As a learning science, there's a lot, you'll go away with certain facts that you know, but I think even more important than that, you will become good at critical thinking. And this is the pyramid of levels of evidence. Right now in healthcare, everything is evidence-based care. That's kind of the go word, and everything has to be based on evidence. And at the bottom, so the things that are least proven to be good is editorials or expert opinions, and there's case reports, kind of individual cases. Then there's case control studies, cohort studies, and the red one is almost at the top, the randomized control studies. And just about the best studies are ones where they take all these randomized control studies and then analyze them and give data. But it's interesting because the more that you learn about the studies and then maybe you've done research, you realize how difficult it is to really have valid information. You have to look at reliability, validity. You also have to look at your population size and see that it makes a difference. And this last semester, I was shocked to learn that they go by, the randomized control studies even go by based on the intent to treat. So scientists they'll randomize and they'll put ones in different groups. And one study we read was about knee pain, and they had a large population, and they took them and they could either do surgery or they could do therapy, physical therapy. And they took these people and they agreed to be in the study and they assigned them, right? The researchers assigned them. And then as the months went on, some of the people that were assigned to have surgery chose not to, and the same vice versa. Those that were chosen to do therapy didn't, or dropped out or didn't finish. But the results that they pulled from that were based on what assignment groups they had assigned them. And so even in a large study with great populations, the results still are not completely valid. So I think we just have to really be careful when we read studies. Or when I was growing up, they would say, science says, or studies show, and you just took it as fact. And I think the more you get into science and the more you learn, the more you realize how hard it is to really come up with new information that's valid. Go ahead. I also hope, as Women of Science, you know Gary Larson. He quit, he kind of retired in 1995, and when I was in college, and I was so sad because I just loved his stuff. And he now he's come back, and he has a website, and these are just taken from there, but I hope you discover Gary Larson, The Far Side of It. It's so fun for scientists. But another thing, okay, you guys are not nurses, but do you know what the average temperature is, or what the normal temperature is? 98.6. Okay, well, the Wall Street Journal just had an article recently that said Stanford actually, so 98.6, a German doctor found that he analyzed 1 million temperatures from 250,000 people. So phenomenal, right? And it was 150 years ago. Stanford researchers feel like the normal temperature is closer to 97.5, and they've looked at 50,000 readings from the years 2007 to 2017. And they think maybe it's because we're taller, fatter, living longer, and maybe it's because 150 years ago, a lot of people had infections such as gum disease, syphilis, and tuberculosis, or bone infections that we don't have now. So I just thought that was interesting. And again, as women of science, we know that just because a fact is widely accepted doesn't mean that it's correct. This one I just put in, I think also as women of science, we are heartbroken when we see that scientific advances aren't used. And this was there's a measles outbreak in Samoa that just happened this last fall. And I believe in 2013 they had the percentage of immunized children was 90%. And then, like, we don't see measles, right? No one even sees it. So you sometimes wonder when you have your beautiful baby and they're giving that baby a shot, you just feel sick inside. And you hear bad stories of what can happen. And apparently in Samoa, a lot of their information is from Facebook, and there's a lot of anti-vaxxers. Anyway, from what I understand, a group of athletes traveled to New Zealand where someone contracted measles and came back, and they sent that lab off to get tested, but it took 2 weeks. And I was reading this for a class, and my husband, his eyes just popped, he said 2 weeks, because he helped develop a machine that does a PCR analysis that can get that result back in an hour. And he looked, and they do have a measles assay, so it could have been within an hour, and then you would isolate them right, and then you wouldn't spread it. But this chart was an older chart because it was from a previous paper, but they have, I believe it's almost 6,000 total measles cases that were confirmed, and I believe the island is 200,000 people. Can't remember. And then 83 deaths, and you look at the vast majority of them are babies. And it was interesting to see what happened to social policy. So they were delayed in, isolating these cases, and then also, sorry, I think I said that the numbers of immunized children went down to 30%. And then it was interesting, though, to see the policy now. Now they said $10,000 fine if you don't immunize your child in any, and which would be, I think, $3,500 in American money. And then any school that accepted a child that wasn't immunized, it was that same punishment. So it seemed like they swung back the opposite, but they must, after seeing how many babies died from measles. So don't be afraid to immunize your children. Okay, this is another one of Gary Larson. And I think the other thing we learn as women in science is those basic answers, the basic research are what we find is proven over and over. Your healthy vegetables, to eat whole foods, low sugar, exercise regularly, don't smoke or drink, and get enough good sleep, and have good social relationships. Those are what will prolong our lives. Okay, now I'm back to you. President Nelson in this month's church news said, "My beloved younger brothers and sisters, you are among the best the Lord has ever sent to the world. You have the capacity to be smarter and wiser and have more impact on the world than any previous generation." And sometimes I think, are you going around campus just like cheering? Like, I am a woman of science, I'm alive in this day, but I also know mental health issues. And I think the statistics for Utah are that 30% of high school girls think about suicide. Our numbers have just gone up. Depression, anxiety, all occur. And so this next quote is from Rosemary Wixom, and she was a past general primary president. And she says, "Because you are his child, he knows who you can become. He knows your fears and your dreams. He relishes your potential." And I know that Heavenly Father is aware of you and your struggles and also your future. There's another quote I've enjoyed that says, "Behind every successful man is a mother who thinks she's a failure." And I can just go back to Dr. Perry's mother, and they actually lived in her parents' home, and I can't imagine the mess of cleaning that, because I was just a kid there. I didn't think about all the damage to the floor. But I also think it's been touching. President Nelson shared a story of after he did heart surgery on a child, and it failed, and then the sibling, and he talks about he went home and he just melted on the floor and bawled, he said, all night long, and his wife got him up and said, "You go do research and you go figure out how to save these kids." But he said he might have given up otherwise. Elder Holland also talked about having debilitating anxiety and depression, just struggles when I think finances were overwhelming in school. So if you struggle, just know that that's normal, and we just get up and keep moving. There's another quote from Elder Neil A. Maxwell. In case you don't know him, he was an apostle from 1981 to 2004. And he said, that same God that placed that star in a precise orbit millennia before it appeared over Bethlehem in celebration of the birth of the babe has given at least equal attention to placement of each of us in precise human orbits, so that we may, if we will, illuminate the landscape of our individual lives, so that our light may not only lead others, but warm them as well. And I hope you know that God knows you and your potential and your life plan. We do a family Skype call on Sundays, and this is a couple years ago. My sister in Florida told about a woman that shared this in state conference, that she felt prompted to pray, Heavenly Father, what should I be doing now? And I don't remember all the story exactly, but she felt prompted to go to visit this one family, and they had just moved to the area and had a daughter with cancer, and this woman somehow had the right connections to get her right into care. As my sister was telling the story, I thought, I would never pray that. I am so busy that I just have enough going on, and I know I'm doing what the Lord wants me to do. But sometimes as the Spirit works on you, just kind of kept nudging me. So of course that night I knelt down and prayed and said, Heavenly Father, what do you want me to be doing now? And I sat there and no answer, so I went to bed. Unbeknownst to me, because my phone was tucked away for the night, a neighbor that I hadn't talked to for a couple of years had texted me and said, Kim, are you still a nurse? I have a friend that needs your help. And this is little Jonah. My daughter actually painted this picture of him, but this woman had gone through infertility treatments and then had a baby, but he was born early and was hospitalized for a couple weeks. And this woman had moved from out of town and didn't have family. She didn't have a ward family. And after leaving in the hospital setting, often you have doctors and nurses, you're surrounded by people, your care team. And she went home with her baby, and then this prognosis wasn't as good as they had hoped, and she was afraid to leave him with anybody and wouldn't even get out of the house. And so my friend Bridget said, hey, will you go and help her? And so of course I went up and I met with her, and we used to watch Jonah for a couple hours a week. And then as he got stronger, I had a running partner that used to come, and then a neighbor from my ward who also came and helped. But that was a time I would not have chosen that. It was a summertime. I was home with my children, and I think if I would have done that on my own, I would have felt selfish. But I felt like this is what Heavenly Father, this was someone in my human orbit that I could help out. A couple of years later, I said that same prayer, and this time the answer was, feed your family. And I said, excuse me? No, can I go save someone or go use my science education? And feeding a family is difficult, especially with kids that are picky eaters. And but my kids weren't starving. I mean, we ate food, but I put more effort into that, and I got up early before they left for seminary. And sometimes I had play practice at school, and I would bring them dinners at school. And my sister told me later, she goes, yeah, your daughter said that she really appreciated that effort. So just know that Heavenly Father knows you and your plan, and will help guide you. I'm going to leave by this quote by Elder Russell M. Ballard. And this was from a Facebook post. I'm not used to getting Facebook, referring from Facebook posts. But he said, women have remarkable influence. You sisters have been divinely endowed with a unique kind of discernment and strength that differs in some ways from the gifts our Heavenly Father gave his sons. These differences are intentional and eternal. They don't make you better than a man, nor do they make you inferior to him. They just make you different, wonderfully, deliberately, everlastingly so. Each of you must come to know what the Lord wants for you individually, given the choices before you. Once you know the Lord's will, you can then move forward in faith to fulfill your individual purpose. One sister may be inspired to continue her education and attend medical school. For another sister, inspiration may lead her to forego a scholarship to a prestigious institution and instead begin a family much earlier than has become common in this generation. Is it possible for two similarly faithful women to receive such different responses to the same basic questions? Absolutely. What's right for one woman may not be right for another. And I just want to leave that with you. And also, just one of our theories, mental health is such a crisis right now. And one of the ideas behind it is not only that the family has fallen apart, but perhaps there's not the community. And in LDS wards, we're kind of immune to that a little bit. I know that my three youngest girls are just 19 months apart. I had twins and then one more. And I used to have a neighbor that we just moved, but she said, hey, can I run with you? And I would be in bed just feeling overwhelmed because, during the night there's throw up or messes, and I couldn't even, like I could just stay in bed and be ahead of getting out of, I was behind if I got out of bed, but she'd come over and help me change the girls, and we'd go out for a run, and then as soon as I got out, of course, I came back and felt like I could, conquer the world. But I hope that you will stick together, that you will be that community to your women in science sisters and to the sisters in your ward wherever you go, so that we can help each other, and also just be firm in knowing that you have a specific plan for you. I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you for that beautiful message. That has rung true. So we say we might have 1,000 Facebook friends, but who's going to come feed your cat? We need that kind of connection, that kind of community. So the remainder of the night, breakout session. In between, there'll be dessert and another breakout session. If you look at your schedule of events, you will know where those breakout sessions are going to be held. My breakout session is Trust Your Voice. It will be here. I'd also like you to pay attention to the schedule. It says that session 1 will start at 6:55. That first session should end at 7:35.